Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the Underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The Underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the Underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun, and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We are your source for the latest Star Wars news, discussion, and reviews each and every week. And this week on the show, we are finally going to be discussing the 2-episode premiere of Skeleton Crew. This has been a long anticipated premiere, and we finally have seen it. We're finally ready to talk about it. So the show's going to be very focused on that, but we will also get to your hashtag Ask the SWU questions as well, and any questions that you throw in the super chat later in the show. So stick around for that. My name is Chris, and joining me is my good friend, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Ben. Hello, everybody, and a mighty ahoy to all of our pirate listeners out there. As everybody who is listening can see, we have all joined the same pirate crew led by SM-33. We've got our weird droid pirate flags hanging in the background, and very excited to finally talk about Skeleton Crew. This has been a show that I think when it was first announced, I was really, really excited for. And then it kind of faded into the background, and there was rumors about problems on set and difficult production and all this stuff. And I started to kind of worry about it, and it maybe sunk on my sort of levels of anticipation. And then the first 2 episodes come out, and I'm right back to where I was when it was first announced. Really excited for the concept, really excited for the show, really excited for the execution. I think the first 2 episodes are great, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it here tonight. It's going to be a great show.
Yeah, so stoked. Also joining us, it's Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
Ahoy there, you mateys. I'm not going to do the whole pirate thing again. We've already been over that. All I will say is very, very, very excited to be talking about this show. I always come back and like, I'm pleasantly surprised by this show. Did I think it was going to be bad? No, but I don't know if I expected it to be this good. So I'm very, very happy. I'm very happy that everyone else seems happy. Like the only complaints I've been able to find about this show are very, very, very dumb. So that's a good sign. That's a good sign that maybe this show is actually good. Maybe it just pleased everybody and everyone's happy. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the first 2 episodes. There's 6 more to go. There's plenty of time for them to screw it up. But I don't think they will. I think there's something to this show, right? Like, it's capturing part of the magic of the original, like, vibe of Star Wars. Like, I'm not even talking about, like, there's some obvious connections to A New Hope that I'm sure when we get to a certain corner, we'll discuss them, if not sooner. But it has, like, it gets back to that original idea of like Luke Skywalker in A New Hope is a very relatable character, not because he's a Jedi, not because he is Anakin Skywalker's son, not because he, comes from royalty or anything like that, but because he's somebody who's kind of bored with their day-to-day life. He's frustrated with his day-to-day life. And that came from George Lucas's experiences growing up in the suburbs. And so George came up with, well, what's the boringest place in the galaxy? What's the boringest job I can think of on the boringest place in the galaxy? And he came up with farming moisture on a desert planet. And this has kind of gone back to that, where they've almost done like a 180 on it, where now they've like gone away from a desert planet and gone to the actual suburbs of Star Wars. And we have these kids who are, at least when it comes to women and Fern in particular, unhappy with their lives, unhappy with their day-to-day lives, and wanting to get out and explore the galaxy. And that's where the story begins. And I think that's a very relatable place to begin a story. And I think that's why these 2 episodes in particular have really resonated in a way that other shows of recent memory just didn't have that same universal grab in the first 2 episodes. Again, not to take anything away from other shows that I did love, but there is something that is uniquely Star Wars about this. It's actually not even uniquely Star Wars. It's very human, but it taps into something that is quintessential to the Star Wars like core. And that's what I think that's what you're seeing in the reaction to the show and why people are being so caught off guard by it, because I don't think anybody was expecting it.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll get to reviewing that and diving deep into that in just a minute. But real quick, we want to remind everybody, if you are watching us on YouTube, punch that subscribe button. Chewy, you can super chat with us. You can become a channel member. And don't forget to also subscribe and review if you're listening to us on a podcast app. We have a Discord. You can join our server. We've got game nights. We have lots of discussions. We have a really cool area for people networking about Star Wars Celebration Japan. So that's a great thing to do over our server. Link is in the description. And make sure that you follow us at the SWU on social media. And as a reminder, we are on Blue Sky, the fastest growing social media app. What do you type in?
Let's go 2.5K.
What do you type in, Ben, to most quickly find us on Blue Sky?
I think I mean, if you're on Blue Sky, just at the SWU, there is like
that's easy.
it's a web address thing. I don't know quite how it works, but basically it's like at the SWU.bs bsky.bs something. I mean, that's the name. But yeah, so it's a very interesting take on URLs and all that stuff. But it's cool. It's cool. It's just a little bit more complicated.
I think that's what's preventing me from getting into Blue Sky, is that I cannot fathom writing out some of these handles. The SWU.bs.bluesky.web.edu.org.
It does get a bit messy when you're like tagging someone and like you're like, hey, so and just like jumble like their name plus jumble of numbers and letters, and it's like, yeah, Blue Sky is still in its infancy. Needs a little time to figure some bugs out. I think they have a very small staff over there, so give them time.
I think it's 3 people. I'm pretty sure.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I think it's 3 raccoons in a trench coat. I think.
Yes, that is what the CEO truly is.
It's still made a better social media than that must.
Yes. Than the other guy. Yeah,
it's true. This is true. Awesome. So yeah, search for the SWU over there on Blue Sky and become our 2,501st member on Blue Sky. Also check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network: Raeside, Ion Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more as well. All right, let's talk about Skeleton Crew.
Yes, and real quick, if speaking of the Raeside, Hannah's not here with us this week because she didn't get her pirate flag in time, so we barred her from the show. That's why. Yeah, exactly. That is the only reason.
We made her walk the plank out the airlock.
That's why, not because she's sick.
See, the thing is, we're all on the mainland. She's on an island on the other side of the world. So they actually had to commandeer a ship and actually hoist the flag and then sail it across the ocean to get to her. And that takes a bit of time.
I will say when the flag arrived, I did have the thought of going out and buying one of those flagpoles that you put outside your house and flying this instead of like the Canadian flag or something, just a space pirate flag, which I think is more appropriate at this point in life. But anyways, let's dive in.
I will say real quick, since getting this a few days ago, I've had 3 different ideas about things I can do outside the house with the flag. I've thought about wearing it, like people wear like pride flags and things.
Yeah.
I thought about just wearing it out just randomly as a cape.
That's a good one.
I've thought about, of course, the classic putting it on the flagpole outside the house and replacing like the American flag or whatever the heck is out there. And then the third is I want to bring it to like one of the places I work and just like, put it on the wall somewhere without even asking anybody for permission and just see what
It's
happens.
a nice, easy wall covering, yeah.
Yeah.
Or a shelf covering, as is with mine.
Yes. Or
All
an
right.
entire room covering, so you can't see how messy my room is. That's really honestly why
too.
this is here.
Incredible. All right, so let's dive into things. We were, of course, talking about Skeleton Crew episode 1. This could be a real adventure, written by Chris Ford and John Watts and directed by John Watts. And Skeleton Crew episode 2, way out past the barrier, written again by Christopher Ford and John Watts and directed by David Lowery. Let's begin how we always do. Go around the table, give some initial impressions, and then for the first time with Skeleton Crew, we're going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, so if it wasn't already apparent, I thought Skeleton Crew was wizard. It was really wizard. No, I really did enjoy this. From the first few minutes, I'm like, I'm feeling this. I'm really this show is hitting all the right notes. And I mean it obviously, like, a lot of the stuff speaks for itself. It's got great acting. All the actors, especially the young actors, I think carry this show so well. The music is great by Mick Giacchino. There's a lot of great production value. I know we've had a lot of varied opinions about the production value of other Star Wars shows that will show up. Don't want to name this in this moment, but this show, I think, looks great from the big expansive landscapes of Ad-Atten and the city and everything like that, to the small stuff like SM-33, I think, who looks great from the moments when you can tell he's a puppet and also he's clearly CGI, but you cannot tell the difference. I think that's a great thing. It's just a fun show. I think ultimately, I think this has caught everyone off guard a little bit because it was kind of like, as you mentioned, Dom, like, there was a lot of rumors, there was a lot of stuff, and it was getting me down about this. Like, oh my God, this show's having some production issues, and we don't know exactly what all happened there. And obviously, they're rumors, but ultimately, this show was hard to figure. It's just like, oh, it's just Goonies in space. Okay, whatever. We'll just go with this. Like, that's fine. Not a lot of huge expectations. These are all new characters. So there's not a Mando or Grogu or Luke Skywalker or anyone in the show. It's just new characters. Obviously, the expectations are low, but I think that helps it. But also, it's just good. It's just a lot of fun, and I'm really enamored. I think it's very easy to get attached to all these characters very quickly, and so want to see where they go next.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, Ben. Beyond any rumors of production issues, like why this show snuck up on people is there isn't the obvious hook, right? There isn't, it's Ahsoka, which is a continuation of The Mandalorian and Star Wars Rebels. It's not Mando season 3, which is season 3 of a very popular show. It's not the Book of Boba Fett, which takes Boba Fett, a very famous character, puts him in the front seat. Same thing with Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's not The Acolyte, which had sort of the lingering Darth Plagueis-y kind of vibes even going into it, along with a connection to the High Republic. Like there isn't that obvious tie. This was, like you said, Goonies, Stranger Things, Stand By Me, whatever you want to call it, in space. And there wasn't a lot to grab onto besides, hey, Jude Law is in this. And I think, again, that's why it was such a nice surprise to then go in and see, like, oh no, this show is imbued with the perfect DNA of Star Wars. Chris, over to you. Your thoughts on this ep?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's caught people off guard, and I think one of the other reasons why is I don't know if they completely captured the full flavor of the show in the marketing and in the trailers, which is not a bad thing, because I think it gave some misdirection to kind of surprise us a little bit. But I think from what we had heard about the show and then also from the trailers, it seemed a little bit domestic. Like I think showing a lot of At-Atten in the trailers and some of those establishing scenes and shots with the characters and the situations, I think gave the idea that it was almost a bit of kind of like a sitcom in a sense. and even as the show was starting and I was watching those initial scenes in At, and it gave me like WandaVision vibes. And it had a very surreal, like, is this really the Star Wars universe? Just like WandaVision is like, is this really the Marvel universe type vibe to it? And so I think that, you know, that could go so many ways. Like, I think so many shows that so many people who would try to do WandaVision would screw it up, and it would be like the worst thing ever. And I think so many people trying to do something like that in Star Wars, it also could be the worst thing ever. But I think they did it right. And I think they did it right because it was there as just the establishment. It wasn't the actual like core of the show and what makes the show move. And so when you actually then go and watch it, and you know they're exploring the abandoned ship, and then they jettison off into space and go to the spaceport and everything, you're like, okay, this show is a swashbuckling adventure show. It's not just a bunch of kids, you know, in a town. Because, you know, you hear like Stranger Things. They said the show was influenced by Stranger Things a bit. You know, all takes place in a town. And so it's like, are we just going to have them, you know, on hover bikes every episode going around the town? Like, that might be a little bit, you know, too domestic and not interesting enough. So, but thankfully it wasn't. Thankfully, that was just an establishment of it, and there's way more to the show, and that's why I think it's so good and so interesting, and people are so pleasantly surprised by it, and I was so pleasantly surprised by it. So for me, I think that the show is hitting on something that Star Wars actually hasn't hit on, which is the 80s revival. Which is shocking. It's like, well, how is Star Wars not hit on the 80s revival? Because Star Wars is an 80s revival. Like, what? Why are they not? And they have to an extent, because they've referenced Star Wars, the Star Wars films that came out in the 80s. They've rehashed the original 3 films so many different ways and so many different things that it's an 80s revival from that point. But what they haven't done is they haven't revived the entirety of the cinematic vibe of the 80s and referenced fully, completely from the distillation of what that is, in a way that Stranger Things most notably did, but then other stuff like the It movies, for example, did as well. There's a lot of versions of things that have done
the
that.
new Ghostbusters movies.
Yep, so many. So I think they're now getting on that 80s revival train, and they did it very well. And basically they've taken, you know, what made some of the best stuff in the 80s the best stuff, like, you know, John Hughes and movies and things like that, and they've, you know, made a Star Wars version of that. And so I think that they hit it out of the park, and I was very happy with my initial reaction was very, very good to this.
Yeah, I think Mando, the first 2 seasons, the first season in particular, but the first 2 seasons as a whole, I think that taps into like 80s TV, 80s, 90s TV a little bit. And then this, you're right, gets into the movie side of things, the cinematic side of things. But I think you hit on something else there, which was, you know, we often dive into why they do 2 episode premieres beyond just like it's a cool thing to say in the marketing. And I think if you end, I think the way the first episode ends is really good. I think it's a nice cliffhanger, but it's a nice cliffhanger where you don't have to wait for another week, right? Because I'll be honest, when I was getting ready to rewatch the episodes this afternoon, I was thinking more about the second episode, and the first episode was like, watching it again was a little bit like, okay, yeah, I guess, because like it was good, but I didn't really want to spend a ton of time on At, right? Like, I felt sort of the same way the kids did. Like, now that we've been exposed to the world of pirates and all the, you know, shenanigans that go on in that spaceport, and, you know, meeting Jude Law and all that stuff, like going back to At and worrying about like, oh, we're gonna miss the bus and miss the test and all that stuff. Like, this, it seems really, really low stakes in comparison. And so, you know, you watch that first episode and it gives you that like domestic version of Star Wars that we really haven't seen before, and when we have seen it, it's in like little tiny bits and flashes. But then to follow that up with, so you end there. If that was the end for the week, okay, that's pretty good, strong start. But the second episode then takes us out of that domestic side of Star Wars and into a more familiar version of Star Wars. It's very sort of Mos Eisley Cantina, wretched hive of scum and villainy kind of thing, but it's not perfunctory either. You know, a lot of the modern Star Wars movies fell into this trap of doing like a perfunctory cantina scene because, as J.J. Abrams put it, you have to do the cantina scene. And so you get kind of like this like quick, rapid into a bar, meet the character there, get out, and the whole scene's over in a minute and a half. And this, though, takes the sort of the scum and villainy idea of the cantina and extrapolates it out for 30 some odd minutes and does some really fun and interesting things with it. So I really love that they did both episodes, and I think both episodes complement each other because they show the two sides of this show really, really well and kind of, you know, put us on a really sort of good trajectory for where we could and where we could and will eventually wind up. So yeah, good strong start. Let's talk a little bit about Ad Atten and where we begin the story. And Chris, I'll throw to you because you've talked about this a little bit already with this kind of the 80s revival. But what did you think of seeing space suburbia? What did you think of the way they used that setting to introduce us to our four main child leads in this series?
So I want to talk about that, and I have a lot to say, but also I want to talk about the scene that happens before that first in chronological order, because I have some things to say about that.
Go for it.
Okay, so to get 100% of my any negative feelings about the show out of the way now, so I don't have to revisit them again. The first scene of the show with the pirate attack, while it was very, very cool and really awesome and a fun way to start the show, it turned something that has been a minor annoyance of mine into a full-on pet peeve, which I've adopted, and its name is Sprinkles. So I like when Star Wars references Star Wars. Yep. It's cool. Mm-hmm. And I at this point, I've seen so many Star Wars things that it's a little bit frustrating to see the same things be referenced over and over and over again. And it's like, yeah, if you're going to reference Star Wars, you know, be a nerd and reference something that's a bit of a deep cut. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but the Star Wars Holiday Special reference in these episodes was absolutely amazing. Like, it is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I jumped out of my seat. I was so excited to see it referenced, even at a level that it hasn't yet. And there has been some, but that was incredible. So do that. Reference a deep cut. Reference something that only really like Star Wars nerds know. Mm-hmm. Don't lift dialogue and shots from the opening scene of A New Hope. Like, what is wrong with you? Yeah. Like, I understand that. And I get it, because I put myself in the shoes of the writer, the director, every time I watch these things. And I know, like, okay, this is the first time they're doing Star Wars. They want to do a Star Wars reference to their favorite Star Wars thing. So they're going to reference Empire Strikes Back. They're going to reference A New Hope. They're going to reference the thing that made them love Star Wars, because they've been waiting for decades. They've waiting their whole careers to do this. They're going to reference the thing that means the most to them. And I understand that. And that's why we have, you know, Ponda Bob all over the place and C-3PO all over the place. all these things. Like, I get that. Yeah. But now now we've gotten to the point where so many writers and directors have had their hand at Star Wars projects, both, you know, on Disney Plus and in films, animated and live action, that A New Hope has been referenced so many times. And the original trilogy has been referenced so many times. And dialogue and scenes and shots and characters have been pulled so many times that I just was like, it was just full cringe for me as I was watching that opening scene completely mirror the storyboarding of the opening scene of A New Hope, and then to the point where there was literal dialogue lifted from it. I'm like, yeah, can we not do this? Like, and I understand that a lot of like kids and people who, you know, don't know A New Hope as well and don't see it as like, it's not like me. That's the movie I've seen the most because it's been out the longest. For a lot of people, it's just a movie, just like everything else. They're not going to have that same opinion about it. They might not even know that it's a reference. But for me, I'm just like, oh, that was cringe. That was so cringe.
So I have to agree with you, and I'm gonna say I blame Jon Favreau for this.
Of course.
And I of all the Mandoverse shows, let's say this is probably the one he's least involved in. I think him and Dave are producers and consultants and actively involved in the development and production of this show. But compared to Mando, Book of Boba, and Ahsoka, I think they have the least to do with this one. I think this is John Watts and Chris Ford's their fingerprints are all over this. And I will say it is so nice to have a Mandoverse show that is not written by Jon Favreau because the plot lines actually make sense and the scenes have beginning, middles, and ends and like all that stuff. But Favreau, I adore Jon Favreau. I've just been criticizing him there, but I would die for this man. I think he's an incredible storyteller and he's done incredible things with Star Wars. He was also super nice when I met him. I'll throw that in there as well. I think he's a nice, good person. But he loves his like on the nose references, and the fact that like R5D4 was like the linchpin of Mando season 3 at a certain point. I'm like, dude, we get it. You love the original trilogy. You love A New Hope, but you gotta stop. And so he has spent all of Star Wars' capital for doing that sort of reference. And so Chris Ford and John Watts, I'm sorry. No. This capital has been spent. Your boss spent it. You got to come up with something else. You got to do something else to the point that you mentioned the holiday special reference. That annoyed me too. Because it was so friggin' on the nose and it was coming off of this that I was like, you guys have to be stopped. You have to be stopped. I get it. You want to do the references to everything, including the holiday special.
That's fair.
But we've done the holiday special gun. We've done other holiday special things like the monster and all this stuff. Like it's time. You've done it. You've gotten it through. And I swear those acrobats had more screen time than Jude Law in these first 2 episodes. Like it went on for a long time.
It was too long by a good 15 seconds, but I'll give them that because thankfully, on one hand, while things like that frustrate me sometimes, on the other hand, being a troll and being campy makes up for that.
And that's part of the Star Wars DNA. That is part of the Star Wars DNA. George put a whole friggin' like song and dance musical number in Return of the Jedi, and then did it again for the special editions.
So I'll give him that. That's fair. I'm not going to say anything negative about that one because again, it is a troll move to put what is quite possibly the worst scene with Star Wars attached to it. In a show in an unironic way, like as an actual story element. That's a great move. That is what's that word? A boss move. There we go. It's a boss move.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say about like the A New Hope like homage, like it was really well done. And there's parts of that sequence that are really cool, like the part like where the like tunnels are shooting across and the way the like claws go into it is very clearly inspired by the Clone Wars and the like, squid ships that Asajj Ventress flies around in season 3. So like there's like it's cool, it's well done, it's well shot, it's well executed, and the reveal that the vault is empty, well done. I give him that. That was a nice little twist on everything. And we can all agree that the guy in the helmet is definitely Jude Law.
There's a lot of people think that. A lot of people, very popular theory.
The entire pirate gang except him is on the outpost in the second episode, and he's in shackles in prison.
Yep, makes sense.
That's Jude Law. That's definitely
that makes sense. I will say I knew the thing was going to be empty when he made such a big deal of it. Like if he was just going to go in like in Joker in the bank heist and Joker, not Joker, in the Dark Knight. scene with the Joker. There we
Yes.
go. That's how I thought it was going. I thought it was just going to go in there and grab the stuff. But the second he started making a big speech about it, I'm like, okay, this is going to be ironic. There's going to be nothing in there. I understand. And so it was nice. They kind of tipped it a little bit, which is kind of poetic. So yeah, great opening scene. Some annoying stuff, but great opening scene. So now moving on to Adam and the original question. The actual beginning of the show, not the cold open. I thought seeing this kind of utopian but still slightly dystopian society was really interesting. I think the way they built it was interesting. It had this very kind of almost communist like vibe to it, where it's like, you have to do the job that the AI thinks you should do, and and the test that you take when you're like 12 determines the rest of your life. And it reminds me of a lot of dystopian science fiction, and I thought that was cool to lean into that, because sometimes Star Wars, despite kind of being categorized as sci-fi / fantasy, doesn't really actually go into sci-fi too hard and they did with this.
I've always thought of Star Wars as a whole as being more fantasy than sci-fi. It's like it's space fantasy. But that that like the concepts that they're playing with there, again, like getting back to the core DNA of Star Wars, that's very THX 1138.
Yes.
Like that's getting into like George's like original like aspirations for what he wanted to do with science fiction, and was well done.
Yeah. So I thought the design of the planet was really cool. Like I liked how everybody drove around on kind of like hover monorails. Like I thought that's cool, because I've seen those designs as like conceptual like future transportation systems before. So I thought it was cool they incorporated something that might be our future. And Star Wars, because a lot of times Star Wars is almost retro. It's almost like the past, because it's kind of copying like a certain era of 70s, like late 60s, 70s science fiction. So because that's like the aesthetic of Star Wars, because that's when the original film was made. So it's interesting to see them go for more modern science fiction instead of a retro 70s science fiction for the style, because this whole city was very much not like this is the future city of the 1970s. A lot of it was the future city of like how you conceptualize it now, which I thought was very interesting and cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, what did you think of Ad-Atten, the design, and the way that our young heroes were introduced?
You're muted, Ben.
Push the button. It's time. We haven't done one of these in so long.
Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
Yes. Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
Star Wars rules. This is momentous. This is exciting. Why, hello there, Ben.
Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy.
He is the founder of the Star Wars Underworld, Mr. Ben Hart.
How's it going, everybody?
I'm realizing that bit is so old and we haven't done it in a while. So there's probably people listening and watching this that are like, what the freak just happened?
I hope that happens every time. That's
Ben, we still can't hear you.
Oh my God.
Let's do a quick story time here for people that might wonder what the story behind Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy, is. There was a show many moons ago. I think it was 2020. I think that's probably what it was. So 4 years ago now, when Ben's connection died, much in the way it has now. And we were trying to get a hold of him, trying to let him know that he had to repeat what he had just said, which happened regularly back in the day. And I was saying over and over again, Ben, Ben. And I realized I was doing it to the rhythm of the Bill Nye the Science Guy song, which is Bill. And we threw it out there that somebody should make the Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy intro. And like this was included as a blooper at the very end of the show. Like it wasn't even part of the main show. And someone did. Dan Duquette, the legend that is. Dan Duquette made the Ben Hart, the Star Wars guy intro song, and subsequently made the Ben's Connection Corner.
That's right.
Ben's Connection Corner song. But I think
Ben, you might need to power down.
Yeah. Again, just like Fern and KB, he needs a new power converter. Yes. And we will we'll return to Ben in due course. What I'll say.
Wait a minute, is this working?
Yes.
I did all that and the mic was muted.
Of course.
No,
of course.
Not after I had turned
It's
it
the
off.
first thing I checked.
Love that. Don't you just love technology? It's great,
It's the best.
isn't it? This is so good. I had so many thoughts. I don't remember any of them. Okay. Let's see. So Ad Atten. I like this whole concept, even though I'm going to, for a second, ignore the fact that there's clearly something more going on this planet.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a conspiracy. There's something happening. There's obviously the grand treasure, whatever they call it. Like there's something else to this planet besides the fact that the parents are severely overworked and the kids are severely over surveilled. But I really do like this window into, what you can expect most people's existence in the galaxy is. I think Star Wars has not done a good job of, in the past 40 some odd years, of kind of getting the perspective of a normal person. We are always focused on the rebel general, the Jedi, the senator. We've gotten those perspectives, and they're fascinating because they're usually the most interesting people. But I think getting just the perspective of a normal person, and in this case, just a normal kid who lives in the galaxy, who knows all this stuff. And we were talking about last week how like our fantasy is about being a Jedi. Of course, kids in this galaxy would be fascinated by Jedi. Of course, they would have action figures. Of course, they would have storybooks, which, by the way, Wim's storybook, I want one of those so bad. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But, like, I love that. And then translating that to is, I agree with you, like, the whole idea of this being not a 70s riffing on 70s, but, like, this is kind of a modern city. It's obviously kind of, there's some elements in there you could see that, but ultimately, it is just a normal, average everyday city. Obviously it's not, because as I said, there's other stuff happening, but I like that we're getting that perspective, we're getting that things, and I think that they did well to take their time and not only introduce the characters and let us for 2 episodes get to know those characters without Jude Law, because Jude Law being such a screen presence, we'd obviously be gravitating towards him because he's an interesting character. Maybe he's a Jedi, he's a Force, there's all these questions. He's going to divert a lot of focus in the next episode, but for right now, we're focusing on them and getting pretty much a whole episode just focused on this planet and what's going on here, I think is great. And I heard a lot of people, have different opinions on this, of just like, oh, it's too close to Earth. It's too close to what we're used to. It's too suburban. And I get those complaints, but I think it reminds me kind of like the prequels, particularly the Phantom Menace. People were like, oh, it's too shiny. Star Wars is supposed to be dirty. It can't be this shiny. We can't go to Naboo and see all this elegant stuff. We can't have a shiny chrome ship. This isn't Star Wars. And I'm just like, just because you haven't seen it before does not mean it's invalid. Does not mean that it is Star Wars. This is just a new part of Star Wars we haven't seen before. And I think this show is already fascinating in and of itself, of showing that part of the galaxy, and showing just what does a normal person that goes to work and comes home and has a kid, and that kid, is just wants to live their life, and their biggest problem is they missed a test, or they're trying to figure out their life. Like, that's interesting. We've seen Jedi versus Sith battles ad nauseum. It's time to get some more mundane stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like life in the Star Wars galaxy, there are points that's just placed in the galaxy where it's just going to be life like we live it. Like not everybody has the same story as Luke Skywalker. It's a galaxy of, millions and if not billions of planets. There's so many people out there. Of course, some people are just living their lives on Ad-Atten like this, going through the motions. You both have mentioned at one point or another that, there is something that feels a little bit sinister in the depiction of Ad-Atten. And we got a really good question for Ask the SWU. And I'm actually going to bring it up now because I think it ties in with what we're talking about. This comes from Daisy. Daisy writes, I've loved the premiere so far. As an urban planner, I've naturally got some thoughts on Ad-Atten's space suburbia. Most of those thoughts are not positive. So my question to the pod is, what is the most dystopian aspect of Ad-Atten that you've picked up on so far? What dystopian aspect do you think will be, and what dystopian aspect do you think will be revealed? Because there's something creepy going on here. What is the most sinister? I will say those security droids creep me out.
Yeah.
And the scene kind of towards the end of the first episode, after the ship has like blasted off out of Springfield Gorge there, when Wim's dad he runs into the droids and their first reaction is like, you're in a restricted zone. And, he's like saying like, my son is missing. They're like, you need to calm down. And it's just sort of like, it's kind of there's something like creepy and unnerving. And you kind of like, you look at him and we know that he has a good reason to be worried and concerned. He nearly just watched his son fall to his death, only to then see his son blast off into the great unknown that is outer space. And these droids that just seem to be hanging around there because they also captured Wim there when he, missed the test because he was late to school and crashed his bike into the gorge there. They weird me out. They weird me out. I don't know. What about you guys? What's your most dystopian element of Ad-Atten?
I think the fact that there's a concerted effort to restrict people's view of reality to a very narrow view of what exists and what is possible. And that's probably very intentional for a reason, going to the second part of the question. So like, for instance, when Wim starts telling people that, he's found something in the woods, no one even like believes him. No one even thinks it's possible that he could. And what that suggests is that they're in almost like a WandaVision manufactured reality where like the only thing that does exist in the universe is the suburbs and the city. And, and there's some knowledge of far off places and Jedi and things clearly, but it's almost like those things are mythological, to them. They're not really real because they don't have that intergalactic or intragalactic connection with any other systems. So that's pretty creepy. And then we're waiting to answer the second part, or are we going right into it?
No, go for it.
Okay. So as far as that is concerned, I was reminded by Skywalker's Academy in the chat that they called it the great work, the thing that everybody was laboring towards. And I wonder about that. And I had this thought too when they said it, is like, is this a throwaway line that is just there because it's contextually makes sense, like more like this is your place in society, or are they actually doing something? Like, are they actually all being organized to make something or to do something that somebody else is benefiting from secretly? And the only thing I can think of is if they're being intentional, because that's a pretty intentional phrase. It's not a phrase that people necessarily say just randomly. It's a phrase from alchemy. The great work is the process of alchemy. historically.
Wow.
So, and for anyone that doesn't know, from a material point of view, that's changing random things into gold through a process so that you could become wealthy, because there's so little gold, but there's so much of everything else. And if you can figure out how to change other things into gold, then you have infinite riches. So if the great work is they're trying to maybe control matter in some way, they're trying to kind of make something out of something else that is benefiting something and making someone very powerful or wealthy. It would be interesting to see if society's being controlled and organized to use people as kind of slaves in a sense to do this.
Mm-hmm. So 2 things. The great work, it works as a reference to that. It's also a High Republic reference.
Oh, interesting.
Because in the High Republic, the Supreme Chancellor Lena So in Phase 1 and Phase 3, she has brought in this new golden age of the Republic, of expansion, of going out beyond the borders of the Republic and bringing in systems and welcoming them into the Republic. And to celebrate this and to further these goals, she institutes the great works of the galaxy. The shining example of this is Starlight Beacon. And for anyone who's read those books, you know what happens. Another one is the Republic Fair on Valo. If you've read the books, you also know what happens. So it could be. I'm not saying it's one or the other. If anything, I think it might be both, because the great work. So let me before I get to how we're going to tie them all together, let me also say this. Wim has Old Republic credits.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't have Imperial credits.
Really great
he has
point.
Old Republic credits. And I wonder, at what point did Ad-Atten cut themselves off? Was it because of the Empire? Was it like, we're going to create a utopian society away from the Empire? Was it before that? What did they see the corruption of the Republic and go, hey, we're going to get out of there? And one of the quirks of the Star Wars universe is that, the time periods are relatively short. They're like 20, 30 years. And yet that's all it takes for like the Jedi to shift into legend and lore and mythology. Even though, most adults in their lifetime, probably, especially if they're a little bit older by the time of the original trilogy, probably were around when the Jedi were all over the place. But, it begs the question of why did they do this and when did they do this? The when is sort of less interesting than the why. And that's where you can kind of tie in the 2 versions of great work together, because in universe, it's like, hey, it's a reference like, we're going to continue the great works of Lena So, of the golden age of the Republic, of, this really aspirational idea. But to do that, we're going to cut ourselves off from the Republic. We're going to tell everybody we're still part of it, but we're going to be completely cut off to the point where nobody knows about the Empire. Nobody knows about the New Republic. Who knows what else they missed in that time period. And while they're doing that, are they maybe they're not creating gold. Maybe they're not doing something they're not doing like a literal alchemy, but they're doing like a metaphorical alchemy of like, we are going to create this quote unquote perfect utopian society that we see depicted in these first couple of episodes, where on the surface everything seems like pretty all right. Like Ad-Atten's like, it's not bad. It'd be like a decent place to live and you raise your family and hang out. But we're all picking up on it because we are being introduced to it in these episodes, that there's something off and there's something sinister. And so what is the price that is being paid for this alchemy, for this great work? So that, I think that's sort of like, I think it's like, it's not an either or, it's not a Star Wars reference or an alchemy reference. It's both. It's a both and.
Yeah.
And it's gonna sort of spiral out into something bigger as the series goes on. Ben, you got something to say? I can see it in your eye.
No, you just got me. I'm coming. A lot of the stuff you're saying is I'm considering for the first time. So this is epiphany worthy here. I'm just like thinking about like, okay, what's again, because I didn't know anything about the High Republic. That's news to me. I I am thinking. I mean, important detail to note about at Atten is that when at night, you don't see stars. There's just like green sheen, like this green film over the sky, which suggests that there's something in the atmosphere. They call it the barrier. And when they leave the atmosphere, or the entire episode, you never see at Atten from space. You never see the planet from space, which begs the question, like, is the reason maybe it's some kind of cloaking device around a planet, and like literally you can't see it and nobody knows it's there, and that's why they're like, no, seriously, at Atten, that's a legend. That's literally we haven't heard of that in maybe, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years. I don't know. I mean, it could be at least High Republic era, since they've been, and because she says Republic, not New Republic, Republic.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's a nice little bit of misdirect, and this is again like, we kind of tore the opening scene apart with the whole A New Hope references. I do think these two episodes are really well written. Like Chris Ford and John Watts, they know what they're doing. They're really well written, and that's an excellent like little reveal later in the episode, because she says, the great work of the Republic. So you're not even like. The fake crawl at the beginning talks about the New Republic. Because we know these shows are connected to the Mandalorian, we're thinking about the New Republic. The whole sequence at the beginning, we're protected by the New Republic. Like they're hammering New Republic at you constantly. And so then she says Republic. So in our brain, we connect that to the New Republic. So then later, when Wim goes to pay for the thing and it's an Old Republic credit, it's like a little reveal. It's a little twist. It's at least it is like for us. I don't know how well that plays for people who aren't like super caught up on the nuances of the Old Republic, the New Republic, the First Order, the Empire, the Rebellion, the Resistance, like all these like kind of sort of the same but different factions in the Star Wars galaxy. But it was at least for us, like it was a well executed reveal. I think Ford and Watts deserve some credit for their writing here.
I think the only thing that makes me think this might be actually really literal, because I think other than this one fact, I think that it's very metaphorical, like you're talking about. But the only thing that I can think of that there's something literal going on here, and that the great work is actual literal reference, is the fact that this is a pirate story. And pirate stories, the MacGuffin is gold. It's always gold. Yeah. And so it's
and even like that the woman, we won't go into what her profession is, who stops Fern and KB and is trying to help them, and it's really not clear if she's trying to help them or kidnap them. It could go either way. And when they say where they're from, I can't remember what the line is exactly, but she's like, the hidden planet of golden blah blah blahs. Like she like straight up says it.
Yeah because they think of it as a lost planet of treasure. And so
it's Treasure Planet.
Yeah, so that's what I was actually gonna mention.
Sorry.
No worries. Is that it's interesting that you have the great work, which is about turning things into gold, and then this is Treasure Planet, which is the science fiction version of Treasure Island, the quintessential pirate story. So maybe it is a planet that figured out how to turn things into literal gold, and the planet is just filled with gold in the center of it, and these people are just living on the outside of it in this manufactured reality to like maintain something for the planet, but they have to hide it from everyone else, because otherwise they're going to come and plunder their gold that they've made infinite amount of through their great work. Like it could be very literal.
It could very well be. It's true. The point is, at Atten, creepy, sinister place. Underneath its polite veneer, it has a sinister undertone.
So going off that again about like what's sinister about it. People have to take this test, and they have to pass this test.
Yeah.
Did they ever say what happens if you don't pass it? Because
no, they did not.
Did they ever show anybody that didn't pass it and is now an adult?
It's a very like a kid point of view of like, oh my god, this test is the most important thing in the world. If I don't pass it, bad stuff's gonna happen, and it's
SAT.
unspecified. But then you have Fern, who is sitting over there going like, oh, he didn't pass the test and he was taken below, and Wim is like, oh, you're lying, and we're with Wim like, no, you're lying, and then you watch the full episode like, maybe she wasn't lying.
No, I'm thinking,
and Wim's dad is like, you need to pass.
Yeah.
Like he's like
So-
really
Really
serious.
anxious about this. He's
yeah.
more anxious than he is.
I'm thinking that, you know, it is one of those dystopian / utopian societies where everybody has a place in the society because those that don't are killed or sent somewhere else. Like, that's what I'm thinking.
Maybe those who fail are sort of the laborers who are the ones who are actually creating the gold if we follow that potential storyline. Because like, you know, like Wim's dad, he's an analyst and he's always having a meeting with his supervisor, and there's all that sort of talk of those things, and it's all like middle management stuff. So you take this test to make sure that you can get into middle management.
I mean, it reminds me of, again, more like quintessential science fiction of different generations, like, or dystopian fiction. Like, you know, you go back to, you know, Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World. There were these different like classes in society that were based on their abilities, and you could have like multiple classes in the society, and the test determines, you know, what class you're in. And currently, you know, these kids could be born into the one of the highest classes, but they could be, if they fail the test, they could be set down to something else where they have a more grueling life. And then it also reminds me of, I'll say quickly, it also reminds me of the Hunger Games and like the Capitol. They could be like in the Capitol right now, but there could be other districts that they don't know about.
Yeah. Well, and Carrie Condon's character, Fern's mom, the like school administrator, she even says to Fern, like, you know, there's only so much space for people at the top.
Yeah, that's true.
And, you know, that could just be, you know, mom's successful. She wants her daughter to be successful, and she won't accept her being successful at something outside of mom's narrow view of what success is. Like, that could just be, you know, like that kind of thing. Like, I don't want you racing your speeders because that's dangerous. You should get a nice, good job working for the company. You know, like it could just be that. Or it could be something much more sinister. That is like, you need to remain at the top so you can, you know, carry on the family legacy and not wind up being sent down there to the mines or whatever, wherever you wind up.
And it's interesting, like your perspective, you know, you can kind of have different perspectives on this depending on, you know, what you're coming into the show is as a viewer. Because like, you know, for instance, like, you know, I have a particular upbringing where, you know, I grew up in very suburban like places most of my life. So that seemed like normal for me and average for me. It was just normalized. And I think that's the case for, you know, a certain group of people. But then, you know, if I travel or talk to people from and learn about other parts of the world or the country, and then at points when I've moved and lived in other parts of the country, I've realized that, you know, there's actually kind of like a privilege to having a suburban life. Yeah. Like there's that the suburbs are not actually like the mundane average life. They're actually it's an elevated, you know, higher class like life from most people's perspective. And so you could then, you know, the show could kind of be tricky because you have that American and Western television faux reality, just like you have like the faux reality of like the 1950s that was almost created through media and not what is actually really happening in 1950s West. You also have the faux reality created by Western television and movies that the average life is like how it is depicted in the show. But in reality, that's not the average life. That's actually a certain top tier percentage of society and of the world, like a 1%er life from a world perspective. And so that could then translate into the Star Wars universe where, you know, these people could be at the top of this really, really massive society where they have it, you know, so good and they don't even know it.
Yeah, well, and like that's the whole, like the suburbs, you know, really sort of start exploding and expanding, post World War II in that sort of 50s era where, again, you're being sold this image of, the American dream and this, standard typical life that is like hammered home, like I said, through media, that is hiding something else, a more real reflection of people's existences. And that again is what this show is getting into. Of these kids, they think we live in the most boring, normal place on earth. And they don't realize, in a sense, how good they have it, but they also don't realize how dangerous that most boring place on earth might actually be, because it's dangerous because it feels safe. As we've just been talking about, there's clearly something sinister going on behind it. But then they go out into the actual galaxy where people are, quote unquote, more real, and things are more dangerous on the surface, but at least you know where people stand. You know what Vane and his crew want. They're not hiding that from you. Even though what they want is really dangerous for KB, Fern, Wim, and Neil.
There's a difference between going into a pirate outpost, and there's danger right there, and then you could be hauled away at any moment, but that, than being in school and failing a test and then being hauled away and you had no idea that was about to happen.
Yeah.
That's
And
the difference.
it's the age-old thing of when you're a kid, it's like, oh God, can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to grow up. I can't wait to be out on my own. And then you get to be a grown up and you're like, God, this sucks. Like that. That's life. That's life. And we've all experienced it. And I think if you watch the trailers for this show, I think it's easy to see, oh, these kids are pining for this new life, this sense of adventure. And you can, relate to that, but you're also kind of rooting against them, and you understand maybe the point of this is that they will have their adventure and then come back and go, whoo, that was fun, but I don't want to do that again. And I really like my boring life here on the things. But there is this extra wrinkle of this mystery surrounding Ad, which has me leaning forward in my seat going, okay, how is it actually going to play out in the long run? Because even if they do get back home, there's still the underlying thing of what the heck is going on with this planet.
Yeah. Well, and that's a very Joseph Campbell hero's journey kind of idea, because the hero's journey is not just the adventure. It's also the return home from the adventure. And a quintessential part of the hero's journey is taking what you've learned on the adventure and bringing it home and sharing it with your community. So, these kids are going to go out there and they're going to have this adventure. They're not going to they're not going to end the adventure and go, that was nice. Now we're going to kick back and watch the holographic acrobats go on and on for a bit. They're going to go out there. They're going to discover the truth about Ad-Atten. They're going to discover some stuff that the people of Ad-Atten need to know. And then they're going to bring it back and share what they have learned with Ad-Atten, with the people there. And then hopefully that will improve life on Ad-Atten, because everybody wakes up to the reality that they are actually living in and decides to do something about it. What that is, that's the fun. That's the story. That's the exciting adventure that we're going to go on. I want to get into the characters a little bit. We've touched on their surroundings and their adventure thus far, but I do want to talk about Wim, Neil, Fern, and KB, our kid heroes, and specifically the dynamics between them. Ben, I'll toss this to you first. What did you think of sort of the way we're introduced to these characters and how they interact with each other?
Yeah, I mean, I love the already very layered characterizations they all have. I think with Wim, it's very kind of, I don't want to say standard, but very normal, kid that just trying to get by. He has these aspirations, and he's kind of rebelling, and he's dealing with a father who is not giving him the attention he deserves. And then you take that further of
single parent.
Yeah, single parent.
He's doing his best.
He's overworked. Give him a break, okay? But he also don't pull this. So you're too old for bedtime stories, guilting him like that. Come on, man.
Can Ben, I just have to say, I want to let you talk, but I just have to say, because you brought that up. Being too old for bedtime stories is one of the biggest pieces of bullshit parents throw at their children. Because what are grown-ups supposed to do before bed? You're supposed to read. You read your book for 20, 30, 40 minutes before you go to sleep. That's a bedtime story. Just because you don't want to read to your kid anymore, you think they should read on their own. Maybe you got to spin bedtime stories as read them for yourselves, work on your silent reading. But bedtime stories, you're too old for bedtime stories. That's bullshit. That's garbage. I read 50 pages of my book last night and it was great.
Are we going to blame parents for the rise of TikTok and insomnia?
Don't get me started. But see, again, layered.
Sorry. That's what Chris just said. We should be encouraging kids to do bedtime stories. That's better than TikTok before bed. And I know because when I don't read before bed, I watch TikTok before bed and I don't sleep as well.
Yeah.
Anyways,
exactly.
3 hours later, I'm still watching TikTok. Exactly. That's what happens until my eyes forcibly shut.
No, but no, see,
Ben, I'm going to shut up now and let you talk.
I would appreciate it. No. But like, again, layered characterization. This dad who you can see both sides. You can see this loving dad who's trying to do his best, who is really frustrated with his kid, who just won't go to school and is doing all this crazy stuff and getting in trouble. But then he's also very flawed. He's someone who's like, it's like, come on, man, don't do that. But then, you have Fern, who is this trying to be the tough girl. She's trying to be this thing, but she's also, you see it in moments, and credit to the actress, like she pulls it off brilliantly, like showing in those moments of just like when the character drops and she's like, oh crap, like especially when they get on the ship and they're trying to survive in the spaceport, and she's drops the tough girl nonsense. It's all about, I need to survive. I need to keep people alive. This is crazy. And then KB, I love KB so much because she's going along with Fern, and she's kind of okay with like bullying these kids, but then she's like, anytime she's alone with Fern, she's like, stop being mean, don't do that. Like she's trying to be sweet and nice, and she kind of just has, Fern's just kind of a bad friend. And then Neil, who is this kid who really does have everything. Like he has, and you see that really great moment. He goes back to his family, and he has these brothers and sisters and this great family. He has a dad and mom who love him and welcome him home and all this kind of stuff. It's so good. And yet he is kind of has his own little issues about he's a little too trusting. He's a little too like attached to whim and hangs on every word his, and he's not willing to call him out on his BS like Fern is. And the dynamics between the characters I think are great. I think you immediately are enraptured by these kids and how multifaceted they are, and it's putting them two together and then shooting them off literally into a spaceship and seeing how they react. And I think it's great. I think the choice to hold back on Jude Law, on Joe Wood, or Captain Sleevo, or whatever the hell his name is, to hold back on him and just have these kids kind of take the lead is brilliant. And I think I'm really looking forward to. Already, I'm so enamored with the performances of the actors and just the characters themselves.
Yeah. There's the credit to the casting. They were able to cast these kids. They feel very real, and they have really great chemistry between them. The dynamics are really good, even though they're contentious. They're at each other's throats. It feels real. It feels true. There isn't, sometimes in these shows, some of the relationships feel a little bit forced. Book of Boba, sometimes the relationships felt forced. That wasn't kids necessarily, but they felt forced. Acolyte, sometimes things felt a little bit forced. Here, everything feels really natural. And I think that, again, that's the point of the first episode, taking the time to, see these kids in their environment. We get to understand who they are, where they're coming from. And it works nicely. Chris, what are your thoughts on the introduction of our four child leads?
Yeah, it's very classic of, again, that kind of like 80s revival TV or cinema, to have, 4 kids and 4 very different kids, being leads leads of a show in this way. They each kind of remind me of different characters throughout different shows and movies. Fern reminds me a bit of the character of Beverly Marsh from It, for example. And I like how they all foil each other really, really well. Because, for instance, expanding more on the relationship between Wim and Neil, Wim is that very kind of like head in the clouds, optimistic dreamer like character who, wants to be a Jedi and wants to explore the galaxy. And he's foiled really well with Neil, who's just a very comfortable and complacent character who is completely satisfied with his place, in society and his family. And he just wants to go home, but he's still following his friend around at his friend's behest. So they foil each other really well. And then, as you mentioned, KB and Fern foil each other well too, with Fern being, willing to bully and manipulate a little bit, and KB trying to reel her in and put some empathy back into the situation. And then it's an interesting dynamic having them as groups, foiled against each other as well. And we're still kind of trying to figure out what, their kind of motivations are, especially the girls' motivations and the entire situation. So it's I think it's very well constructed, all of their characters and how they relate to each other, and it makes for a lot of really good dialogue and probably a lot of great character and relationship development over the show that we're going to see.
Yeah, I Fern and Wim, even though they're butting heads through the entire episode, it's kind of a situation where when you get two people that are too similar together, that's when they start butting heads, because they're both dreamers.
Yeah.
There's a really small moment relatively early in the first episode when Fern and KB are working on the bike, and specifically specifically KB is working on the bike, and Fern is just sitting there with her head in her hands, looking out of the garage, looking off, and she's kind of lost in space. And you can tell she's dreaming of something else. And you see again in the moment with her mom that she wants something more than just to follow in her mom's footsteps. She wants something beyond that, which it's more subtle than it is with Wim, where it's very, very obvious that like Wim just wants to be a Jedi. He wants to go out there. He's always reading the stories. He's big into legends. Like he really, that's who Wim is. Fern hides it a little bit more, but all the like little things about her scream that she actually wants the same things as Wim, right down to the point. And this is a really like nice little detail. She's always wearing her jacket inside out.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. Interesting.
Yeah, she just does it like you notice when she's running home, she turns it the right way out, so that when she goes in, she's kind of hiding it from her mom.
Interesting.
And she's always like wearing it out because she wants to be different. She doesn't want to be the same as everybody else. And so her and Wim, they I think will eventually find that common ground of wanting, wanting to go on this adventure together. And then Neil and KB are kind of their, like, I don't want to say sidekicks, because they're not. They're their own characters, especially Neil, and I expect KB will grow into that as well. But they're the loyal ones. They're the friend. They're the Sam of the group, right? Like they're there to help their friends through it, and probably in the end actually be the ones to save the day, much in the same way that Sam is the real hero of Lord of the Rings. I can't carry it for you, Mr. Frodo, but I can't carry you. I expect that to happen at some point.
I mean, it is you're tricked by the way the characters are introduced at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, but by the time you get to the end, especially with the books, you realize Sam is the main character.
Yeah. And one other thing just about KB, with the like cybernetic enhancements, I think this is the mods from Book of Boba done right.
Nah, that's a good point.
Like I like
Yes.
the concept of the mods
Mhm.
and all that, but the execution came up a little
Yeah.
bit short. And that's not
Mhm.
a dig at the actors. I think they did the best with what they could, but Fern's little thing, her Geordie LaForge's eye thing, all that stuff, like that feels much more.
It's a different. I would argue it's a different vibe, like
Mm.
intentionally different vibe of just
Yeah, fair.
like the mods are. They're kind of presented as like this is like the rebel gang. This is like the Star
Mm.
Wars equivalent of like tattoos of just like things you're just gonna get modifications just because. Where it's like KB, maybe she was born just with maybe I don't know. Did she just have bad eyesight? And maybe that's just her. That's just the Star Wars version of glasses, and she just got the upgraded pair. That's actually like this thing, which is cool and very, very very usable.
That's very nice Apple Vision Pro.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about the character that we are introduced to at the end of the episode, Jode Nawood, aka Jude Law. I think we're just going to call him Jude Law. But he is introduced to us officially in the final scene. And, we see him use the Force to get the key. Clearly, there's something more to this guy than meets the eye. I got curious about this because I was wondering about his backstory and who he might be, where he might come from. So I looked up how old Jude Law is. Jude Law is 51 years old.
Wow.
So if we then take the 9 years after A New Hope that have passed, according to Wikipedia, that the show is set 9 ABY. And then we take the 19 years between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, that gives us about 28 years. So round about the time of A New Hope, if Nana Wood or whatever the frig his name is the same age as Jude Law, he'd be about 23. If we say Jude Law's playing a little bit younger, okay, he's maybe 18, 17, 20, somewhere in that range. And so my theory for this character essentially is that he is Kanan if he never met Hera.
Yeah.
Not that he's literally Kanan. Kanan is dead. I'm sorry. We've all had to witness and experience that multiple times. But that this is he's essentially a Jedi, a young Jedi, either an old Padawan or a young knight who managed to survive Order 66 and got involved in the underworld, became a pirate. And that's what he did to survive the years of the Empire. And now in the New Republic age, he's just continuing to be a pirate because that's really what he knows. That's been his adult life. So why would he change from that? And he's probably gotten pretty good at it. He's probably learned to, like it and desire it. So even though he can use the Force, he's still, not necessarily a super trustworthy dude. That's my theory. But I did love the introduction, the way they shot his whole entrance, where he's kind of in shadow with the hood and in chains and all that stuff, all leading up to him using the Force and the great line, "Can you keep a secret?" Oh, so good. So good. So love the introduction of Jode. What did you guys think?
Yeah, a very interesting character, and unraveling the mystery of his character is going to be one of the most fun parts of this season. I love how he's mysterious in that way. There's so much more. I mean, my opinion is nowhere near fully formed since we've seen so little of him so far. So I'm very curious to see where they continue taking the character.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny watching the trailers. I got the impression of this, like, and watching that little bit of him calling the lights, the key to his hand. We talked about it, I think, on the show. Just like, what if there's trickery going on? Is he using a string or something like that to do that? Is there some kind of other thing that he's posing as a Jedi? And it is suspicious that he's potentially in this cage and he doesn't call the key to his hand until they're in the cage with him. So like, is he trying to put on a show, whatever else? Weirdly, I buy this, and people are talking about it in the chat, and it's been posed on social media by the official Star Wars accounts. Can they trust Jode? Can they trust him? I think the show wants us to, but I feel like, yes, I feel like he is being somewhat truthful here. I think he's not a Jedi. And I think he's planning to play into that. But I think he does have the Force. I agree with Dom. I think that comparison checks out. And I'm really looking forward to seeing like how this shakes out with him as a character, and how he uses this. It also could just be a ruse. At the end of the day, it also could be that he's faking it. But I think it's more interesting a character who has the Force and hasn't been a good guy. I think it's great, and we talked about it earlier, and it's important to like this introduction. We were introduced to Captain Silvo, and I'm sure those who like we don't have our tinfoil hats on will be surprised when it's later revealed that, oh my gosh, he was Captain Silvo all along, and that's going to be a big reveal. But the important aspect of that is that Captain Silvo is not a good guy. He comes in and he threatens a harmless old guy who's just trying to protect an empty vault, and then orders him to be thrown out an airlock. He's one of these ruthless pirates, and he is not a good person. And I think that's going to be, revealed to the characters in I imagine a dramatic way of them thinking, oh, he's a Jedi. No, he's the opposite of a Jedi. He's a pirate. He's a ruthless, bloodthirsty, pirate who's just out for himself.
All the things he says in the trailer, are actually describing himself.
Exactly. So going forward, how that shakes out, but I think ultimately talking about flawed characters and how they might change, I think what's going to be interesting to watch is how he changes. How these kids change his perspective, especially now that he's down and out with the pirates, and he's in a cage, in chains, and he needs them to get out. And what will he do to happen? That's going to be very interesting next episode.
Yeah, it's a very classic, it's almost like a sports movie setup. It's kind of the setup of Mighty Ducks, where you have the old crusty coach who was great once, but doesn't want to help the young kids, and then the young kids come along and remind him of why he loved the game to begin with. And it's also kind of Last Jedi in that regard, where perhaps this. Look, I'm making a big ass assumption with this. I don't know anything. I haven't read any spoilers for beyond these first 2 episodes, so I don't know. I'm just guessing at it here. I'm presuming that he has some sort of Jedi past. Maybe he doesn't, but let's presume that he does. If he has some kind of Jedi past, but has strayed from that path and become a pirate, become kind of a bloodthirsty mercenary, maybe seeing a kid like Wim and Neil and Fern and KB, and seeing all of them kind of looking up to the Jedi and looking up to what the Jedi could be, rather than what he is, might inspire him to, return to the Jedi path. Much in the same way that, part of what gets Luke back into the game in Last Jedi is Rey's appeals to him. And it's much more on the nose in a deleted scene. There's a deleted scene from Last Jedi, which you can watch on Disney Plus and on the Blu-ray and all that stuff, where Luke tells Rey that the caretakers on the island are about to be attacked, and she rushes in to save the day, only to find out that really they're just throwing a big old party. And there's a great sort of moment where she runs in with her lightsabers and sees everybody partying and kind of waves the lightsaber like it's a glow stick, because she just wants to fit in. But then she kind of goes at Luke about why would you do that to me? And one of the lines she says this to him is, across the galaxy, our real friends are really dying while we're over here doing this. And that kind of gets through to Luke. And she says, that legend of Luke Skywalker that you hate so much, I believed in it. And Wim could say something to the effect to Jode of that all those old Jedi stories, I believe in them. I believe in the idea of the Jedi. And perhaps Jode might be swayed by that, Or maybe he'll go, nah, screw you, kid, walk the space plank. I suppose that's also a possibility as well. Well, we've had a lovely conversation here about this episode, and we've gotten into a lot of good and interesting points, discussing, all of the most important elements of these episodes. But there's something that we do when it is a Star Wars TV show. It's a segment that we love, and it's a segment that we miss when we don't have it. It's time for your favorite segment. It's time for my favorite segment. It's time, once again, for Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Ben, I've stopped even asking you if you've prepared anything for this segment ahead of time and just assume that you have. So what have you got for us in the corner, Skeleton Crew wise?
Ben Hart, the Star Wars.
Am I here?
Okay, now you are.
Now you are.
Everything just froze for me. That was real weird. And right when I was supposed to talk, I love this. But yes, of course I'm prepared. How dare you even insinuate that I might not be prepared? Maybe once or twice I was unprepared. I don't know. So my first up, I'll keep this quick, okay? I know you guys like it quick, so I'll try to make this expedited. I know when I go on way too long, then it gets messy. My first thing is not one I noticed. Okay, I stole this from someone. But they offered it up, so I figure why not. Captain Silva's helmet is very much seems to be a nod to the tricorn hat. For those who don't know, I looked this up. I didn't know what a tricorn hat is. It's the tri hat, the one with the 1 point in the middle and the 2 points in the back, the one that you see a lot of pirates wear in a lot of pirate lore. Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow wears one, if you need an example. So that's pretty good. And shout out to MCU Forever One on Twitter who pointed that out to me. So great. I forget the kid's name, but the kid on the bike who's like, "Hey, what's up, losers?" Whatever. His name is pretty much a play on words and a reference to Bob Falfa from American Graffiti. So that's really cool.
Which is Harrison Ford's character.
Exactly. Come on, they know that. You don't have to spell it out for you. To hold their hand. They have Google.
I'm just making sure. Just making sure. I don't assume that all Star Wars fans have seen American Graffiti. They should, but I'm not going to assume that they have.
I suppose that's true. I liked the hyperspace, for lack of a better term, the interdictor effect that you see on the Onyx Cinder. That when it drops out of hyperspace very violently and kind of spins around, it's kind of this things, the same thing we see in Rebels. When is interesting. We get a mention of Adelon from Rebels and Eldani when he's mentioning planets. Although it's interesting to note, I found this very interesting. SM33 says Eldani is quote it's a sulfurous bog world, which I don't know. I genuinely don't know if that's a mistake on the writer's part, or it's like, are we supposed to assume that stuff happened to Aldani after the events of Andor that turned it into a sulfurous bog world? Because it was space Scotland, pretty country, not really a bog world. I didn't get the bog world vibe, but maybe that's the other side of Aldani. I don't know.
It could also be an unreliable narrator thing, because it's
possibly. It also could be, you could chalk it up to SM33 has incomplete archives or bad information. Any number of explanations. I would like to get the creator's perspective on that, because they've been talking a lot about this stuff. There is on in the space station, there's a Klatooinian who is getting a Hutt clan tattoo on his on things, and then gets messed up. And then also I couldn't help but correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe these episodes finally canonized, or at least screen canonized, the words refresher and criffing.
I believe so. Refresher was in Rebels because there's that awful scene when AP5 follows Wedge into the bathroom.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Wedge says refresher, but I think Griffin, I think that's our first on-screen use of it as far as I'm aware.
So long.
All right, I'll take it.
I
I'll
keep
take it.
inventing new words first.
Yeah.
Right. And these also Wim calls his credits datteries. The only other time I've heard them called datteries was Qui-Gon Jinn in Phantom Menace. He calls his credits, which I like after like 20 years of watching the Phantom Menace, I was like, what is datteries? I had to like look it up because I was transcribing a quote. It's wired. So these next two are real weird, I'll admit.
Okay.
But and I can't actually confirm either of them, but I know within my heart of hearts that they are correct. The first one, when they go into the prison, the brig, there is some whistling in the background. I swear to God, it's the same whistling that you hear in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. I swear.
Oh, is it really?
That would make so much sense.
Because like they're like trying to whistle and get the dog to come over.
Yeah,
to
I was thinking of that too.
Yeah. It's replicated in the movie. They do the same thing in the movie Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen to that, but I'm pretty sure it's the same whistling. Also, there is a musical cue in this episode that keeps recurring. I would call it an action cue. That keeps recurring, and it's this. Now I'm blanking on like actually how it sounds, but I was literally in the shower last night going like, where have I heard that before? And I finally tracked it down in my memory, and it's from Revenge of the Sith. It's actually this. It's I can't repeat it. You'll I know somebody out there knows what I'm talking about, but basically it's the same musical cue that when Obi-Wan gets shot by Commander Cody when he's singing is dun 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 dun.
Yes,
kind of goes.
yes.
They keep coming back to that, and I don't know if it's Mick Giacchino referencing John Williams or it's just a happy accident. But it was driving me insane for a great many hours because I'm like, I've heard this before. I know it's in Star Wars before. I was like, is it from another movie? Is it something I don't know? But yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
I hope that means that next week we get a full segment of Ben's shower thoughts.
If only my phone was completely waterproof, I'd just be taking notes in there.
Oh my gosh, I have had my phone for 4 years and it has survived.
All right, incredible. All right, well that concludes our first of, I guess, 6 more editions of Skeleton Crew's Ben's Connection Corner. Ben's Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Okay, the one character we haven't really touched on is the one on all of our flags here, SM-33. I'll just say, love this character. Great addition to the classic Star Wars droid pantheon. Deserves to be up there with 3PO, R2, K2SO, BB-8, L3. Excellent addition. That is something we have not had a lot of in the shows, which is droid characters. You know, IG-11, but he's only around here and there. And really, his best scenes are when Grogu's controlling him, and he's just going, no, yes, no, yes, no. But yeah, SM-33, Nick Frost, great performance, great sort of pirate droid. I really love the performance. And Ben, you mentioned it earlier, the CGI and the puppetry mixed together is very, very well done. But yeah, anything else we want to bring up about this episode, these episodes?
I mean, I just reiterate they're really fun and great, and ultimately.
Then would you describe what you're about to do as final thoughts?
I mean, that's kind of it. I mean, I could roll into final thoughts right now if you want me to.
Why don't you roll into final thoughts and score out of 10 for these two?
It's fun and great. 10 out of 10. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, my score is really not going to be that far off from that. Really, I really did enjoy this. I think more so than I thought I would. I mean, I think I'm more inclined to be more selective and to be more of a harsh critic these days than I would have been a few years ago. Especially when it comes to Star Wars, because we have so much of it now, and admittedly very quality in a lot of cases. And I have to really put my thinking cap on and figure out, okay, how do I actually feel about this? And Skeleton Crew was not one that I was like super excited about. Like I said on the show, I'm like, I watched the first trailer and it was fine. It was fine. I wasn't really feeling it. It wasn't until the second trailer I was like, okay, this is kind of my jam. I'm feeling this. And then actually watching this show, I think really kind of hammered home. It's like, this is good. And I was starting to feel these past few weeks of just like, this could be really good. This could be one of the better shows, if not one of the best shows. And I keep a lot of people saying that. And I'm not going to make any bold proclamations like that right now. But I will say it's shaping up to be one of my favorite shows of things. And I have a lot of favorite shows. I like most of them. It's not like I'm that harsh of a critic, but Skeleton Crew is already shaping up to be a really fun, enjoyable ride, really well written, well acted, score's amazing. Is the score available? Because I will freaking buy it. Okay. It's great. It's wonderful. I can't wait for next week. It's actually less than it's a little bit less of a wait. I will give
more
this
of a wait.
Actually, it is, I think. Well, it's less now.
One day.
It's less now.
Sure, and it's less now than it was when you started talking, but
and it's even less now.
Oh my gosh.
So I'll give this a 9 out of 10. I really have very few, if any, complaints. I didn't even talk about the fact that I think you're nuts about the whole holiday special and the stuff from earlier you guys were yapping on about. I thought those were great.
All right. Fair enough. Chris, what about you? Final thoughts of score out of 10 for episodes 1 and 2.
Speaking of less of a wait, more of a wait, the stories I heard, the tragic, traumatic stories of all the people who knew from the marketing that Skeleton Crew comes out on Tuesday, who logged in on Tuesday earlier in the day, excitedly watching the first 2 episodes, and then sadly waited for the 3rd episode to come out and didn't get it. It actually did happen. I was told of this. But in general, the feedback has been so positive. It has become water cooler talk at my day job. I hear people talking about it all the time, and then I always jump right in. Hello, you don't know me, but let me talk about this with you. So that's been really fun.
Like, have you heard my podcast?
Yeah, no, I don't even let that on sometimes. I just talk about the show. So very positive reaction from this, which is amazing. A lot of people are comparing it to the first season of The Mandalorian or Andor and how much they like it. For me, it's kind of similar to Ben. Like, I went in with kind of just, average expectations, not expecting it to be the most amazing thing based on the marketing and just the premise of the show. But yeah, I was very, very happily surprised that it was really, really good. It took me a little bit to kind of really feel that way again, that with those issues in the first scene. And then, but once they started kind of getting into the lives of the kids on Atata, and I started seeing kind of how the dialogue was structured, the characters were being built, and how the scenes were being shot. And I'm like, yeah, this has that same quality that Stranger Things and it, and all the things that they were referencing, Stand By Me and the Goonies, you had and I'm like, I knew pretty quickly, this is a really good show. So at this point, I'm just hoping it doesn't have premiere-itis. Like, I remember after watching the first episode of Star Wars Rebels, the show that has incredible season premieres and finales, but sometimes some inconsistency in the meat of the season. I'm hoping this isn't a situation where they threw all their best stuff at the premiere, and then it's just going to kind of slow down for a while until maybe it peaks again. Like, I'm hoping the show keeps up the same quality level, but I think it will. And the reason why I think it will is if it's mirroring things like Stranger Things did a great job at being a show that was just good, consistent all the way through. And so I'm hoping that they're going for an adventure plot that doesn't have your low budget, slow down episodes that just is just bang bang, next thing until it's done. That's what I'm hoping for, and I'm hoping we're getting those same feels from all the episodes as we've gotten from the first two. I think it's more likely than not that's what we will get, and that is my hope. So for me, 10 out of 10. It exceeded my expectations, and I think it's continuing to move Star Wars in new directions that it hasn't been. So that's my requirements for a 10 rating. It's gotta push the envelope somewhere, and I feel like the show did.
Nice. I'm gonna give the first two eps 8 out of 10. Not because I think they were bad in any way, just because I think there's still room to grow. I think there's space to go beyond what we've seen so far. These were good, they were strong, they were an excellent start to the series, but I still see that there is more potential here. I'm really interested to see where Jude Law takes us. I'm really curious to see how his relationship with the kids evolve. I'm interested to see how the kids' relationships with each other evolve. I think that was something that was really strong in these first two episodes. I'm curious to see how the mysteries continue to play out in the wider galaxy and on AT-ATN. And I think this show has a lot of like really, really fun energy that I think is going to lead it to be, a really fun ride across the board. But I'm leaving them more space to go beyond just how good these first two episodes were. So strong 8 out of 10 from me. We will save the rest of the Ask the SWU questions for a future week. Got a couple of good observations on the first two episodes that came in, and we've also got some older questions that are still lingering there to be answered. We will get to them as soon as we can, but I think with that, we will begin to wrap things up for this week.
All right, so that'll do it for this episode of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We want to thank everybody so much for watching and listening to the show, and of course, we'll be back reviewing episode 3 of A Skeleton Crew on Thursday next week at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, sometime in the late morning, Australian time on Friday. In the meantime, you can follow us at the SWU, including on Blue Sky. Use their complicated URL thing to find it, or if you know how that works, or just go and type into the search bar the SWU once you're already on the site, and you'll find our account where you can become the 2,501st follower of the SWU on Blue Sky. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting tonight.
It was my pleasure, as always. My favorite episodes of the show are when we're reviewing a new Star Wars, and I love that we get to do this for 6 more weeks. And I love it anytime we get to sit back, relax, and just break down 1 or 2 or sometimes even 3 of these episodes. And this was a great conversation. I opened my eyes up to some stuff I hadn't considered yet, and it just has me more excited for next week. So really looking forward to be back to do that. In between shows, if you want to talk some hockey, you can tune in to Game Over Toronto. We go live after every Leafs game. I'll be live this Friday, aka tomorrow as we record this, aka today as most of you are listening to this, aka yesterday or the day before for some of you, talking about the Leafs versus the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Washington Capitals showdown that's happening this Friday. And I'll also be live, I think, next Tuesday, but I can't remember who they're playing. I should know that. So search for Game Over Toronto on YouTube or your favorite podcast apps and tune in, and we'll have some fun. And I'll probably sneak a Star Wars reference in here or there as well. But yeah, that's it. See everybody next week. It's going to be, we'll see everybody in 7 days.
If you're able to put as many Star Wars references into Game Over Toronto as you put hockey references into the Star Wars Underworld, then that would be a great accomplishment.
I'll work on it.
You can follow Dominic on social media at DominicJ25. Ben, thank you so much for hosting too.
Oh, it's a pleasure as always. It's especially a pleasure when my microphone works. It's great when people can hear me, and I will echo what Dom said. This is some of the best. Even when the show is not as great, even when that particular episode you're talking about is not as great, it's always fun to come here and discuss it and get into the nitty-gritty of it, the good and the bad. And thankfully this week we had 2 really great episodes that think spell something really great is to come for us. And yeah, I mean, come on, Star Wars Christmas, Star Wars through Christmas, Star Wars after Christmas. How can I get this better than this? We're gonna have the holidays just got a whole lot better. And yeah, more skeleton crew on the way. Cannot wait. But in the meantime, yeah, it's gonna be great.
I for one cannot wait to tell my family, please hold on Christmas dinner. I have to go watch Skeleton Crew.
Oh my gosh, I forgot that was going to be a thing. Oh, this
on the
is
24th.
exciting.
This is great.
This is amazing. This is so
And then on the 31st too, you have an excuse not to do anything on New Year's Eve. Wow, that's perfect.
Oh, that's great. Well, we actually are having our big Christmas celebration on the 24th, and there's no way we're not watching that in addition to the Polar Express, which I've also been told we're going to be watching, because the amount of Star Wars fans that are going to be at that celebration is we've got the guy who owns a lightsaber blind stick company, and the couple that had a wedding that R2-D2 showed up at. So like,
incredible.
We better watch that. I mean,
Sounds like a party.
Goodness. Amazing. Amazing. And you can follow Ben on social media at Ben Hart with no E. You can follow me at Seek3PO. We want to remind everybody to hit your subscribe button on YouTube on the way out. Thanks to everybody who chatted with us, and thanks to all of our channel members. And make sure you as well hit the subscribe button on the podcast app you're listening to us on, if you're listening to us that way on your way out as well. Next thing that you can do right after you finish listening to the show, if you haven't already, go join the SWU Network Discord server. The link is right here in the description. And check out all the great stuff we have going on over there. And of course, a reminder to check out all the other programming we have on our podcast network, including the Raeside, Ion Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. So that's it. We'll be back with another episode next week. And till then, for Ben and Dom, my name is Chris, and may the Force be with you.
It's a wrap.
Are ye mateys?